middle of like the Grand Avenue Bridge project, driven just a random truck up there and said,
I'm playing the police chief today.
All right.
The stereotypical version of the police chief.
All right.
I keep staring.
If I had a flat field head, it'd be like. Oh.
All right, thumbs up.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Short staff report, me, staff, Bruce, Shannon, and Brad. We're willing to come out and kind of get an update on everything that I kind of noted within the staff report, the IRP, the clean rate that Mean is looking at, the health of the grid transmission, all the fun things, and I was hoping for an hour, which is like we got. Basically, just gonna turn it over to you guys to kind of go through presentation. And we can, you want questions while we're going through, or after?
We'll take them either way.
Whatever.
Comfortable.
I'll give it another one.
All right. Well,
I'm Brad Hance. I'm with Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska, and it's great to see so many familiar faces. This is nice. We've been trying for several years to make this an annual thing, and I think we finally did it. COVID interrupted that, but it's a good thing, and we appreciate the community wanting to get the updates. That means a lot to us. It really goes to speak a lot of the engagement. We realize that I think we are the, I think Glenwood Springs may be a little different, but I think we may be the biggest check we write each month. The biggest check property, but no, we can talk about that. Nonetheless, we realize that. Much information as you want and as you need, as we go through, and I do think there's a lot of great things happening with me that we want to be able to talk about and share. So yes, Shannon Coleman, and this is a very familiar face for you folks as well. He's our supervisor of resource planning now. And then Bruce Dahl, while he may not be a familiar face, he's new to Glenwood Springs coming up here. He's been working with Matt for, I want to say, 4 years at least on the substation. It's gotta be a good 3 to 4 years. Working with the PSO interface and more recently on the power pathways project. So he's been one of the key players behind the scenes, and we drug him out with this to get to see this in person. So today we're going to touch on extremely briefly, just a quick background. I think everybody's fairly familiar with this, but Shannon will go into our 2050 vision and talk about the 2022 IRP that we just submitted here in July, late June to WAPA. And then I'll go into some of the modernization initiatives we're undertaking. We was 41 years old this year. So there's a lot of things that have been in place since we reformed in 81 that we did look at. And we've been working on that the last several years. And hopefully you like what you see in those regards. We'll talk about organized markets, grid transition challenges, because that's a big thing. And then just we'll go into open discussion and feel free as we go along. Don't hesitate to ask questions as we go. So quick refresher that Mean was formed in 1981. We're a wholesale power supplier. We've got 69 participants covering 4 states. And this fight, I'll talk about the markets, regional markets, but this actually puts us right now currently in 4 different markets. We're in the MISO, independent system operator. We're in the SPP, RTO. In the West here, we're still in good old-fashioned bilateral markets, which means the power goes directly from our power plants to the load points versus the markets, and I'll talk about how that differs in the structured markets. And then we're in an energy imbalance market for our load business and a black imbalance. So there's a lot of changes going on, and I look forward to bringing you up to speed on those. The key and the big difference with me is we've got a board of directors that are made up of a representative from each community that we serve, and it is an active participant in our organization. So we also have committees that report to that board, and Matt is engaged and involved in a number of those. How are we different than another wholesale supplier? Say if you were with Holy Cross or PSCO, other wholesale providers. Well, you as a public power community, as a municipal, you set the rates in this room. Right, and that helps guide that. But you set the rates, you have that local control. When you're a member of Mean, you take that control to another level. Now you have that voice at the wholesale supplier level. You won't normally see that in the wholesale supplier. You can complain all you want, as we've seen with transmission, and it may get you nowhere, but it means you help have that control. You help set the direction of the organization. That's what really does make us unique. And I think with the modernization thing, that's really folks helping guide us in the areas that meet the needs of the communities today. And that's really refreshing to make those changes. And then we provide a number of things. I won't put down to the whole list above and beyond that of just services inherent to being a Mean member. So being part of the organization, there's a number of things we do that are unique, and some of it's just ad hoc. You know, each community may come with a different meaning. We have the abilities to help them through that piece. You know, it's just kind of a value add service. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks again. Echo what Brad said about thank you for allowing us to be here and share a lot of really exciting things that are happening in our industry and with you. So, as you all know, because I think we've reported on it before, in January of 2020, the Mean Board passed our 2050 vision, which is our goal to become carbon neutral in our portfolio. This graphic here kind of shows the steps along the way there. All of the members kind of had different motivations and different goals when they first set a 2050 vision. The vision itself is looking at not only what we need to do, but how on earth are we going to get there? And with that is a lot of external factors as well, a lot of limiting factors and just realities that we're not necessarily in control of. Opportunity there is when we look at our portfolio, what's going to happen in the future, where loads are going to go, and what opportunities do we have to change that portfolio to get to carbon control. We kind of find ourselves right now at the planning stage. We just completed the 2022 Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a resource plan for the future. So that's kind of where we sit now, and I'll talk a lot about that. From the plan, when the board approved the plan, they gave us the direction. How do they want us to move forward to try best to get to carbon neutrality in 2050? From there, I think we'll see a lot of collaboration, not only between staff and membership, but also with legislators, with markets, just everyone around us to try to collaborate and get to where we need to be. Obviously, right now, there are some old ideas and some new ideas, a lot of future technologies that we need to take a look at and take those to a feasibility point where they're not just ideas, they're going into go on the stage, and we can really make realistic plans and actionable plans to move forward. Really sensitive. I don't know if I pressed that or not. So where are we now? This kind of look at our starting point. The graph on the left shows a chart of Mean's energy generation for our fiscal year ending March 31st of this year. And you can see that in total, Mean's energy is just over 50% carbon free. We wanted to contrast that with Excel, obviously the biggest power supplier here in the state of Colorado, and it compares pretty closely. Both of us about half. So we feel like we're making pretty good progress so far, but we know that there's a long way to go there. And in that long way to go, we know that the decarbonization goals that not only me, but a lot of other utilities have set would be challenging and costly at best with today's technology. So fortunately, there are some exciting technologies that we're seeing coming through to help facilitate everyone's decarbonization goals. The information on this slide is just an example of that from one of our energy research partners, Black Hills Energy, with some of the things that they're looking into, some new technologies that all of us need to have mature in order to get to dispatchable carbon-free energy and make that reality. So the possibilities here, they're just kind of listed. So some battery storage, hydrogen systems, carbon capture, a lot of those showing a lot of promise. And the good thing about that kind of technology is that it's applicable not only to today's existing resources, but to future as well. So there are some kind of incremental changes we can make by applying them to today's resources, and then some new technologies that we can roll in with those ideas that are already being worked on today. So we'll continue to look at that kind of opportunity and see how we can roll those into specifically our portfolio. And speaking of both, electrification is a future development that we're also exploring. These graphs show the various load scenarios that we looked at in the integrated resource plan. And the important one for you to look at is that dark green one that shoots up at the end. This is our electrification scenario. I know you're seeing a lot of that here, at least talk of it here, and the reality of building electrification, electrification will likely lead to a dramatic acceleration of load growth into the future and drastically change our resource plan and kind of make us recalibrate and look at a new gap out into the future. And because of the impact that this will have, means planning to do a separate study for to project electrification into the future, both in terms of timing and location, because all of our different communities obviously will enter into electrification at a different rate and at a different timing. So from there, we'll study an optimal resource plan that we need to take to respond to that kind of thing.
Maybe ask a question. For our source, I mean, we're hydroelectric, which is obviously a big issue because of power and things like that. How is that factored in what you guys are doing, or is that impacted?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And we do, WAPA does update us on a quarterly basis, and then they do give some long range plans. And we do study those every time that they kind of report that to us. Right now, we are still showing, their projections. Like I said, they give us a quarterly energy number. So we put those into our plans right now and kind of see where that's going to lead to. Right now, the resources that are being impacted are fairly small in Means portfolio because it's the silica crisp resources right now that are seeing an increase. Once that gets into the lab area, then that will be a bigger thing. But right now, we feel fortunate that they do report to us on a regular basis and they do give us a long-term plan.
It's a shutdown power, right? Our board week that said, power will shut down, and I don't think it'll actually, I hope it doesn't happen.
Yep.
If it does that impact our supply or our cost?
Yes. Yeah, to be blunt, yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, and not just you, but obviously a lot of people. And right now, luckily, a lot of the West is at kind of that inflection point where there are a lot of resource changes being made. So there's a lot of development in sight. I won't say that it's, breaking ground or anything, but there's a lot of development in sight because of the decarbonization goals. So I think that will probably be rolled in with all these developers that already want to build something because they know people want to get greener energy. Hopefully there'll be a lot more opportunities there because they're already looking at development. So for against some reservoirs to also help the power, or you guys. We have not looked at that. I don't know if you know anything about that. Yeah, I just didn't know that's great. Yeah, not that it's now. Oh, that was Excel.
That there's Excel's looking at.
It's
They
gravity.
actually just dropped it. Oh, this is more. Sorry.
I have a question on the 2050 goal of being carbon neutral. Where are the goals? Like what's 2030? What's 2040?
We did ask, we surveyed the membership and asked if they would like to set an interim goal. And they did show a favorability for setting a 2035 interim goal, and we just haven't brought that back. With all the IRP stuff, we just haven't gotten back to them to try to set that goal, but it is something membership wants to do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because I see, like Cell's going to be 80%, or I'm sorry, Tri-State by 2030, and Holy Cross is 100% by 2040. So I think if there's opportunity for that to be a little more aggressive than 2050, I think at least.
I think that when we get to later in the conversation for some reality of resources and people talking about turning things off that they probably won't be able to, that we should probably get to that part of the conversation. I think there's a lot of goals out there that are fairly unrealistic. Like other they would meet that you probably would agree with me on that, and there's already people stepping things back at this point because once again, you have to think about it by 30,000 kilowatt coal plant off with natural gas plant off, maybe 5,000 megawatts renewable to accommodate for that. Because of the capacity, the wind's not blowing, the sun's not out, the batteries associated with it, the feasibility of actually migrating as quickly as people are talking about at this moment may not actually.
Well, I think that's why those interim goals are really important.
Yes.
Holy Cross is having the same conversations we're all having, see the same thing markets we're saying, and they're saying 2040. So unless they're telling their members something that's totally unrealistic, and I think having a 2030 goal would be.
Well, and Holy Cross's load is so small compared to like an Excel Energy, compared to like ours. Also, we can go to wind power fairly easy. We're 22 megawatts. So Holy Cross will probably get there. They'll maybe do it before 2040. But the larger companies, the ones we really have to worry about, it's going to be an interesting process. So, yeah, we're gonna set a 2035 goal. Membership's already talked about that. The IRP was 500 pages long and get that done. So that was kind of on the, sitting on several of these committees, you know, was kind of the goal to get that done. We had to do compliance basically. Now we're gonna go back and see what is 2035, and we as a group, outside of even some of the conversations in the board meeting, don't want to set a goal that is unrealistic. Because some people have already done that, and it's gonna be really interesting when they have to step that back.
And I would also add a lot of those goals, if you read down into them, they do say depending on the development. of the- Which we say as well, you know, there's just not enough dispatchable carbon to get to a 24/7. Right now. But
It's a great news law.
And what, on the demand forecast, why is all the, you know, or what is the variable that's causing the decrease in demand from the?
That's your, the end of your contract. That's a great question, look at that, that's you.
That's what we're talking about.
I can try
That is the end of Glenwood contract. You can see it's a significant drop for me.
So we could potentially like pop back up again.
Right, which would, again, change our resource mix again, because we would need additional energy, we have that more opportunity to add. carbon. It's a great question. Very timely, good question.
I like to do those segues.
We planned that.
Hopefully with our modernization.
That is true, that is true. All right, so we'll roll into the integrated resource plan. I think I've talked about that here before, but kind of the planning stage of that 2050 vision is our integrated resource plan, our IRP. So the purpose of the integrated resource plan, like I said, is exactly what it sounds like. It's a at minimum, it's a report that we owe to WAPA every 5 years as a condition of receiving allocations of federal power. Mean uses it as a little bit more than that. It's to demonstrate our resource plan for the future, resource adequacy, which is required in all of our markets, and also to best plan for what those resources will be in the future. We use it as kind of a strategic planning tool. And the entire process is conducted over multiple years to make sure that we're getting input from the board and the board's getting input from the communities and funneling that back in. Due to some resource changes in the future, we do have a need for new resources. And the integrated resource plan is a really deep dive into all of our areas, all of our load scenarios, future scenarios that might change how that looks, and then ask the question of how do we best serve those needs in the future? What resources are the best resources that we could get in the future? So this is a slide that we included just to show the participation that the board and public have been invited into. We have held 19 public meetings prior to the approval of the IRP, and for every process within the IRP, we've solicited feedback from the board, and we presented information on the assumptions, on our inputs, and some preliminary results that we got back. So I do want to iterate here that means staff doesn't make those resource decisions. It all goes back to the board, and the board votes on all of those resource decisions. So our goal is to give them as much information as possible so they make the decisions that are best for me as a whole and for their own communities. So we're pretty proud of the collaboration that happened along the way, along those 2 years of the IRP. So the IRP report begins with a study of needs, load, and resources in terms of capacity and demand, which is shown on the left, and available energy consumption, which is shown on the right. Capacity and energy from our resources is shown in those vertical bars, color coded by resource type, and then the total load obligation is shown in the horizontal line. Yes.
Can I ask a question? So right now, it looks like maybe my colors are not well, but it looks like there's some nuclear power
Yes.
now,
Yes.
but in 2024, there's none.
Yep. We have an existing power purchase agreement with NPD for it combines some coal plants and a nuclear plant, and that's coming off at the end of next
Because of contractual.
And, you know, I used to live in Craig, and there's a lot of talk about these mini nuclear things and these salt things
Yeah.
and all that. Is one, just forgive my ignorance, but is nuclear carbon neutral? Okay. So if those things did come online in the next decade or two,
That would be fantastic. Yeah, we would view that as a very, very positive option because it is base load. So it's on all the time, which if we take the place of a coal plant that now is on all the time, we can actually, control when that's on. And also we get 100% capacity from that, unlike a solar or a wind plant, we're all, we get capacity. So for resource adequacy purposes, it would be nice. Okay, all right, awesome. These charts do show the combined, all of our regions, for mean, but, as Brad kind of, described before, we do operate in those distinct regions of SPP, ISO, and here in the West, in two different, markets here. So we do actually study load and resource on a regional basis. And so for mean and total, and for each region, that gap that you see out into the future between our load and what our resources can provide, shows that need for new resources in the future. And specifically, I just spoke to the nuclear and coal that comes off. We also have a power purchase agreement for two coal plants in Wyoming that comes on in the middle of. So those are some of our gaps that we see out there. So then we look specifically. Yeah.
When you see a reduction from a coal plant, or you see this reduction from a nuclear plant, is it because they are contracting with other entities, or because of the life of that coal plant or something?
These particularly are simply the end of our contract with them. We would probably have the option to replace, to extend them.
You're
but
choosing not to.
exactly, because they're carbon resources, and we've set the decarbonization goal.
Thank
That's
you.
our
I'm just
opportunity.
trying to put all these.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question.
We will be having some discussions with MPP about keeping a little bit of Cooper and Ware. Nuclear provides a lot of energy, carbon free, and we look forward to the small modular reactor, but that technology coming in. So it's good to see that keep advancing and finally getting a little more traction.
I read about that.
I don't know that they're gonna have anything up and going until after like 2030, from what I'm aware of.
Seems like far range when I read this.
Is that something as either members of me or me as a body can have an active role in, or is that a conversation more at the state level and sell and some of these bigger players, I guess? Not that means nothing.
I can speak to that, UAMPS, which is the Utah Association of Municipal Utilities. I got that acronym. They've been working closely with the Department of Energy on developing one, and we followed that very closely. We could have, I want to say a couple of years ago, could have signed on for that. The problem is it's a little far from our footprint. So while if they get cost competitive, until we get, say, a regional market here, delivering the energy into the footprint with tack on, we would have had to go over 2 or 3 transmission systems, which would add, say, like $15 a megawatt just to get it to the footprint. Now we're hearing some developments in the Wyoming area, so those would be something as they start emerging, we can show interest and start tracking.
How close are we to? Are we any closer to having a regional market?
I'll talk about that.
You're a little early. That's an excellent.
Keep thinking ahead of us.
You got this whole. So this is a look just at those gaps specifically by region. So these graphs kind of summarize the capacity energy needs by year and by region. So showing us what we need for those future resources. Yellow bars show our needs in the west. Again, capacity is on the left and energy is on the right. And green bars showing SPP. MISO we have very little need, so there wasn't much study done there. So this is what our future resources need to supply. This is kind of the magnitude of what we need from them. So again, the goal of the IRP is to point us toward what are the best resources to give us this kind of capacity and energy.
Shannon, is there new funding available through some of the recent bills passed, the infrastructure bill and then bid?
Yeah.
Will there be significant resources that can come to me or the region?
we're hoping so.
Okay.
Everyone's still kind of sorting it out because it's not clearly stated, what the qualifications and eligibility for some of that is and how it's gonna be rolled out. And because of how it's been determined and how it's going to be distributed, I think it's gonna be some years before a lot of that kind of happens, but it is something that we're studying and it's for one project.
Well, with the solar project, again, we want to talk about here shortly. We've been working with, actually, I think I started conversations with them or the developer prior to that in 2014, 2015 timeframe. That's finally coming to fruition, but it's been a on and off, and I'll talk a little bit about the dynamics of that with all renewables right now. It's kind of an on and off thing, but we just got pricing last week. That does reflect what they know, what the IRA and the benefits it brings in. So,
Okay.
yes, it's definitely here, and developers are diving and figuring it out.
And I'd say also on those kind of future developing technologies as well, that a lot of that funding will help those to move forward and you know, give a little bit of support to kind of demonstration projects where, you know, without the funding, it might not make sense to put something like that in, but with that funding, we can help some of those to move forward as well. Okay, great. All right, so back on the IRP, sorry, there were ultimately 2 phases of evaluation for our supply side resources. The first took every possible supply side resource and narrowed it down to what makes sense for me, what fits into the priorities that our membership has. And then the list that came out of that is the list that you see here. This is what we ultimately put into the model to run through and see what came out with the best resources for us to go forward with. So we looked at natural gas combined cycle, both with and without carbon capture, looked at landfill gas, municipal solid waste, standalone wind and standalone solar, natural gas fuel cell, hydropower, and then we looked at the scenario of wind combined with the battery and solar combined with the battery. And then to your question, we did look at the extension station. So what we looked at, we tried to size these according to the energy needs that we needed in each of the regions, and then also looked at resource adequacy from a capacity standpoint as well. So how much energy we need in each capacity, and that's how we size this. So here are the results. The numbers are not really what's important. We should probably look at all there's a lot of numbers there. What's really important to look at here are the 3 categories of results that we did look at and show to the board. So first we looked at the 15-year government requirement. Basically, what's our low cost option over the 15 years that we're looking at. Secondly, we looked at price variance. We looked at 9 different scenarios into the future, and we said, how does each of those possible portfolios or resource additions, how does it behave with these different scenarios in the future? So basically, what's the risk we're taking with each of those? And lastly, we looked at the carbon intensity, how that changes in the portfolio with the addition of each of these resources. So we discuss this in depth with the power supply committee that Matt sits on and with the board. And from there, asked them to make their recommendations on what resources they prefer. And again, we separated out how SPP performs and how OS performs because they are structured differently. So what did the committee and board ultimately recommend? The list of preferred portfolios that the power supply committee and the board ultimately approved are hydropower, landfill gas, a combination of wind and storage. And with that, we did have some discussions about how the economics of storage might not be there quite yet, but we wanted to show a preference for storage. And a lot of these facilities can be built such that storage can be added on. Same with solar and storage. And then lastly, natural gas with combining with carbon capture and sequestration. Bottom line, these are the resources that the board has selected to fill those needs out into the future for capacity and for energy. But those recommendations for resources will kind of guide our future actions and what we will look at. Not saying you have to get each one of these, or this is the only thing you can consider. This is kind of the direction that we will forward. Is there a ranking in that, or is that just no? And that's mostly because we will look at the specific economics of real projects as we go forward, but trying to kind of narrow our focus to these that are the most.
And is the hydro, is that looking at a specific region or?
Hydro was in the approved or preferred portfolios for both SPP and the West. Obviously, in SPP, there aren't as many hydropower facilities, but I'll tell you in just a minute about a very exciting one.
Okay,
Hopefully we'll be contracting for, but, yeah, normally you don't think of hydro when you think of Nebraska. But we do have a really good option. So that's a great question. And again, to talk about the specifics, we will keep those three same parameters, low cost, low risk, and a reduction in carbon emissions in mind as we do look at specific projects out.
And this is a big thing. I mean, you have to think there's 69 communities and they're very diverse. People have opinions on what's most cost effective, what's good for everybody. And you know, it was a really interesting conversation once again in the boardroom and out of the boardroom on where this was going to go. So ending up with, because I made that recommendation, I think I was the one that jammed off for 15 minutes trying to pick the recommendation. But I kind of made these recommendations and everybody voted for it, which was a big thing, I think, for me, that everybody supported this. And the only thing that was really on the list is carbon is natural gas, but it is with a carbon capture system. So you can see it means trying to move away from coal. Natural gas is going to be with us for a while, so let's use it as efficiently and as carbon free as humanly possible, but move towards these other resources that we should all be moving towards in an efficient manner. So that we don't have to call everybody in the city of Glenwood Springs and say, by the way, from 4 to 6 tonight, you guys can't have your lights on, you know, kind of thing, which is where maybe we end up in sometime in the near future where people have to turn power on. But this was a major step, I think, with all 69 communities supporting this. Because there's definitely some differing opinions on things. Maybe it's keep it possible.
How much, because I can't read the little thing, which is like coming over. How much does landfill gas actually contribute to this? I'm just sure it's quantity.
Sizing wise, when we looked at each, so we took our existing portfolio and what's going to stay in the future, and then we sized each, we only put them in one at a time. Right? So we just added hydro and then we just added landfill. And we looked at it from a size this so that it covers all of the energy needs that we have. From that, we get a certain amount of capacity credit. Landfill gas actually is 100% credited, so we get all of the capacity to count for our Mr. Gas. Something like wind is really low. It's like 20% if you're really lucky, you know, for your capacity. So you still would have to add capacity. A lot of times that's where the natural gas came in. We added it simply for capacity. Other than that, we do have some members that have behind the meter kind of generators in their own community. See that for capacity. So all of these were sized such that the energy contribution was equal. It gave us the energy that we needed. So I don't know if that was exactly what the question was, but that's how we sized.
Well, and you can look at on the charts before us, AB needs 70 megawatts more power capacity from a resource in 2025 or whatever it is. Maybe net or maybe landfill gas is 10 of that or 15 of that through a PPA, because I think that's the way it means. Looking to move this to a PPA instead of purchasing into something, and then you're owning it until it's dead. The coal plants maybe 5 years, maybe 50 years, and you don't know what it is. And then you're also on the hook for the maintenance of them, and we see a lot of downtime on things. But me still has to pay for a lot of that, and we're now buying energy off the market instead of being able to create energy off the resource here. So, but all of these things combined together are what we're going to look towards to fill those gaps. It won't be all landfill gas, a little landfill gas, a little bit of wind over here, maybe a little gas down here, maybe a lot of hydro up here. But this is the resources we're trying to use to fill those gaps.
We also look to, with the exception of the hydro and natural gas, those, you know, landfill gas, wind and solar are things that also can locate in individual communities and near communities also. So I'll touch on that a little bit later, but yeah, that's something we also look at as a really big benefit. If we can do that with our resources, that adds another layer of benefit for other communities as well. So I'll touch on this just really quickly. Another thing that we did look at in the IRP were demand side programs as well. Just simply as a way to reduce peak demand, reduce energy consumption, thereby reduce that need for future supply side resources. When we did the cost benefit analysis, none of the future programs actually showed enough benefit to make up for the cost. And that's largely because we have some really, really good energy efficiency and demand side programs as well. And not only me, but several of our communities also administer their own demand side programs as well. All of those look to be continued. And we also do have a few things in the works here. I'm looking for in conjunction with Pool, looking at a study on residential EV chargers. We have an advanced metering infrastructure program kind of exploring right now. And that on its own obviously isn't doing anything, but it's a tool that we can use to better control demand side.
Would that be taking energy away from cars, electric cars during peak hours?
There's a lot of that, like the integration of that and being able to not only see into that, but ultimately control it, like you said, and even getting down to, rate structures and things like that. So there's a lot of work to be done on electrification and the EV side of it as well. But we see a big, and then the next bullet point there is battery storage. We've had that conversation with Matt and with some individuals from Nebraska as well on, is residential and commercial battery storage something that we can harness as a collective to benefit me and benefit the community. So we can roll some of that control up into me so that we're looking at kind of our footprint wide numbers as well. And we need to provide benefit all the way up and down that chain.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Such a diverse, spread out, also capacity. That's not all.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for all of that storage systems. Okay. And then another thing that we're pretty excited about is our distributed generation program. You probably know a lot about this here, but in late 2019, we completed a business case for an aggregated request for proposals for solar, combined many communities together so they could get better pricing on solar than any one of them could get on their own project. We had really good response on that, and so far that's resulted in proposed PPAs for over 29 megawatts of community solar. And I'm going to on that list as well. This table kind of shows the total there. Right now, solar is the most popular application of that, but we've also had some discussions with communities about some other technologies. So it's possible that we might see some other technologies under the distributed generation policy. Another take on that is and you'll also see that on this list here, is being a joint action agency. We have the possibilities of communities collaborating together. We have some of our communities that are just geographically located such that solar doesn't make sense for them, but they still want to participate in something like this. So you'll see on here, Denver, Iowa, and Ciudad, Nebraska have collaborated together so that Denver, Iowa will own the asset, but will be located in Ciudad, Nebraska. So kind of a nice way for them to collaborate and still be able to take advantage of the distributed generation policy. And then lastly, and Brad will speak to this as well, is we're exploring mean contracted resources located in the communities, and specific to solar right now, just because of the really good pricing that we got from that PPA. And as we look to a lot of those things, like I just spoke to the resources that look really good in the IRP, the wind, your solar, your landfill gas, we realize that those can be locally sited and distributed. That gives us the benefit not only of adding that non-carbon generation in the future and getting toward 2050, but it also has the benefits of minimizing interconnection costs and increasing resiliency and allowing communities to have some of that control over their power and being able to respond to things at their site. And like I said, Brad spoke about a lot.
Does project have any type of time frame or?
As of yet or next summer.
As far as coming online,
For that,
I
yes.
think they want all their PAs firmed up by the end of this month or into December, and I think the goal is next fall to have everything in place. So,
That'll be.
We're on the list.
Oh,
A piece
yeah.
of property that I was trying to acquire to accommodate for that even more was unreasonable from the ownership standpoint, so we're looking at a different location. So we're on the list.
Hoping to
We'll see
stay
if
on
we
the
end up
We can see the change out there.
outside of city limits. 2.4 megawatts is like 20 acres,
Okay.
a little less, that's like 16 acres, but it's a substantial footprint.
Right.
It has to be up high, so we gotta have to leave. You crack the leave it.
Right. I was just curious.
But Doug and I are working on a secondary proposal, and we'll be working with Rocky, once we kind of get that worked out a little bit more and figure out how much we can put in an alternative location. So we are working with them. Hopefully we'll stay on for it.
I hope so too. Yeah. And again, Brad will talk about the expansion of some of those sites also.
And if they close this first round, they're already looking for the number of communities that either couldn't get the land things figured out or the system things figured out. So there's a number of communities that are in line for, we'll start another round, basically, where the pricing may be not, it may not be the same package as it is currently, but it shouldn't be too far off. So they'll start another round. Those that weren't able to make it in,
All right, so the culmination of all of this resource planning, this is what I get excited about here. There's several potential resources that we're looking at really closely, and we are very, very close on. In fact, we'll be asking for board approval for 2 of these at our November meeting. Last year, we submitted a proposal for power supply from a 60 megawatt hydropower facility in central Nebraska. It's a What's that? Hydro Nebraska. It's a really good strategic resource for us. It lines up with exactly what we need resources to replace that coal and nuclear PPA. It would provide fully accredited capacity and renewable energy. So it's really a win-win-win for us. You'll recall that hydropower was one of the portfolios in the IRP, so it also lines up there. And again, like I said, hopefully the board will be approving this in a couple weeks. And we're also evaluating a solar resource. Brad touched on that a little bit with NextEra to be located in Nebraska, right on the edge of the west end of SPP, to supply capacity and energy to replace again that coal and nuclear power purchase agreement that we have. The resource also has the potential for the integration of battery storage in line with those preferred portfolios, and we do have some numbers and pricing on all of that. Right now, we're looking at just going with the solar and reserving the right to add that storage as we get figured out not only the pricing of that, but how we want to best operate that storage. Looking at, we've also started discussions recently with another counterparty in the West regarding a solar project that will align with the end of that whole contract in the West. The solar resource may be paired with natural gas, but just because of the capacity needs, as I explained earlier, and for resource adequacy and backup power. So we'll present more detailed information on this, hopefully in the January board meeting. We were hoping for November, and we still might see something, but January for certain. As I mentioned before, we're actively planning that solar generation located in new communities, and Brad will have a lot more on that. We're also in discussions with Aspen about expanding the offtake from Ridgeway hydropower and bringing some of that to Mean as well for Mean to receive additional capacity and energy from that resource. And then lastly, this year, we released a request for information for renewable resources, and we received responses for some wind projects both in SPP and the West. So that's something we're still digging into, and if those pan out to be good additions to the portfolio, we'll bring this to the team as well. And one thing that we've been continually monitoring and keeping in mind is overall pricing for renewable PPAs. And Matt touched on that a little bit on prices everywhere, increasing all over the place. And renewable PPAs are no exception. I think we all got used to the idea of renewable energy is so cheap, and it's going to stay cheap forever. A lot of issues with supply chain with the solar tariffs also cause some issues there, and just supply and demand, not only on the materials side, but projects in general. Developers can a lot, but they know supply and demand as well. So a lot of those and these are nationwide books, and you can see them broken down then by region, but all of the regions are increasing. So that's going to be something that we're keeping an eye on also.
How does, I mean, the big transition to renewables has been with such competitive pricing against natural gas, oil, that type of stuff. So what does that mean? Are we going to kind of set this in line if these prices increase and people are going to turn back to non-renewable systems?
I think it'll make it more competitive. I don't know that people will turn back just because of so many other factors, leading to. I think it'll probably keep some of those other resources online. Again, because of a lot of those capacity things that we've talked about, and as they get closer, although with what natural gas is doing, Brad will talk to that. It's not close, but it speaks to what Matt says. Everything is just getting more and more expensive. as things go. So just wondering.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah. They're doing just fine. And just to end it on kind of that idea that a lot of recent developments have come about after some discussions with Black Hills as well. We have that power purchase agreement for two Black Hills coal units, and that comes off next year. And in recent meetings, they have informed us that they have plans to convert one of those units to natural gas in 2025. And asked about our interest in jumping back into that one. We also have ownership stake in the Wygen 1 coal plant, and they are planning to either convert or replace that unit by 2030. As I mentioned earlier, on the kind of new technologies side of things, they're also planning a hydrogen pilot project and a lot of research into carbon capture. So we're keeping in communication with them just to keep some options, in front of us and what's going on. These are just some of the new developments that will shape our look at future portfolios and demonstrate that, even though we don't have a lot of control over those resources, not being the majority owners, we'll support that kind of development, and incorporate those conversions or retirements as we see them coming. And we kind of look at that as a sign of changes in general. If Black Hills is looking at this kind of changes for their coal units, and we support and encourage that, we're hoping that other resources kind of go the same thing, and hopefully we'll be in a position if we're following along and watching this and actively at least we can help other resources.
This is Black Hills, right?
Yes, yes.
When is we anticipating 10% off coal?
That's an excellent question. It's tied to a lot of this. That's a great question. Yeah, I'm not sure we know a lot of the we see these numbers for Wygen and for Nielsen too. We have a couple other I think our big question marks are the WEC2 plant in Nebraska and the Walter Scott unit in Iowa. Those are both fairly newer units and have a lot of compliance. Like I said, looking at Black Hills and what they're thinking, I'm imagining that other utilities are going to see the same things and making similar decisions. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that. But.
I mean, it was the unfortunate part about ownership agreements that they really felt set and end date. The reality is the number of insurers for coal plants are dropping. You may be a point where you're not going to get insurance. If a carbon tax it may become completely uneconomic. There are a number of drivers that I think will fix it in the end before the contracts limit will slide. I wish we had a crystal ball in that sense, but some of these plants, we're learning the stations now. Here's some new felt, and if you think about it, they're going to go past age 60. It's very expensive just getting more and now the new good neighbor rule is going to have an impact on all of it as well. Putting on electric catalyst reduction is going to be a tremendous price point. So there's so many pressures in there. I wish we could definitely say yes, it'll be here. As we're talking about our SSM, we're kind of hedging that a little bit. That there is probably something realistic, although we don't think it's close to continue on. We were very excited in working with Black Hills to see how they're basically going to, in essence, repurpose these facilities. And the thing to bear in mind, we get more renewables. These facilities may still exist. And I'll show a slide on what happens when you get markets in place and what it does economically. What they produce may be dropped way down. It may be what comes on in an extremely cold winter event or on extremely hot days in the summer. So they're kind of covering what oftentimes folks talk about getting the grid to 80% is economic, is feasible. It's that last 20% that's going to kill you financially or make a huge financial difference. And maybe there's some kind of interim stage where the facilities have a purpose to cover some of those times. And it's good to see, that's the way Black Hills is transitioning, knowing that natural gas is currently higher price, so that plant won't run as much. Now, since they are mine mouth, their emphasis is reliability. So they'll still have a fuel backup source even in the winter time. So, you know,
So Brad, are you going to talk a little bit about like, what's the cost comparison right now of for the, electricity generated off of the coal plant or all business uses?
yeah, I'll go to
That's not
the energy pricing. All right, Shannon did cover quite a bit under the modernization, I think, especially with the DG pieces, so I'll go pretty quickly with that, because I think really the crux of it is what's going on in the markets today, and what energy pricing is looking like moving forward, so. The renewable distributed generation policy that basically grants communities the ability to put the 5%. Those numbers can change and those could happen during resource shifts as far as increasing those percentages. Right now with this solar RFP that we conducted for the membership, this is kind of our first batch of folks that really exercise this right. I think Oak Creek may have prior to this, we may have one of those. So we did this, the pricing became such a good price with the solar RFP that it's really bringing a lot of folks into this and taking advantage of this. So with that, again, we did that RFP and it really brought in great pricing. So that pricing was right at about means energy rate. So it was a community could come in with land to provide the solar developers. It should have been a stone dump to do this. Additionally, we set it up that the community doesn't have to, and we're really excited to see what the provider brought to the table, but they don't have to put a fence up. They don't have to, they're going to put like pollen friendly grasses, native grasses, things like that for solid maintenance. And the nice part is the purchase power agreement. So if there's a mechanical issue with the arrays, if they don't fix it in a timely manner, you're not paying for that energy because it's not producing like say an inverter would have on a section of it. So they'll be responsible for that. So the cities don't have yet another thing to throw on folks' plates. And then we also talked about a portion of that will be generation in communities. So if you have extra space, we want to be discussing if you want to allow me to have some solar as well. And again, the pricing really made us look at this as, hey, this is a great option. And I think you mentioned earlier, distributed generation, having it where the load is going to become bigger and bigger in grid modernization. So it fits very well.
When we talk about distributed generation, is that, and maybe it's more of a conversation with Matt and us, but we have, some acres-ish where we can put a solar farm. How does that work? Do we get to generate that energy and it comes, if we pay for it and it's our land and our facility, do we get to do it? And then it comes directly to us and reduces our purchasing amount from Mean, or does it go to the grid and then we have to buy it back?
Under the DG policy, that's, that basically states here, you pay for that energy directly with the solar vendor, and that replaces energy you would be buying from us.
How's that work for you guys? I'm not sure that much. I mean, we had this whole conversation a couple of years ago about how we couldn't have certain amount of solar arrays on like rooftops of like dealerships because it produced so much that like you guys are like, well, wait a second, like that's not the deal. So we are part of you and you are part of us. So your success is,
And yes, there was a misconception up here initially on the DG policy. No, from a residential, we don't advise any of our communities to try and stop that effort. People can be allowed to do that. The important part is we hear it, know it, and understand it, so we can plan for the future. That's the big thing. And ultimately, while people may reduce some of their energy consumption, the grid still has to be there. Because unless they have battery storage and insufficient quantities that they can store through 5 days of something like this, where you're getting very little production, So, and your system still has to be there, so really getting your rates, you know, to demand rates or rates that acknowledge that people, you know, covers a better part of Matt and Doug's time and trucks, because you still have to have wires to their homes.
So again, in a hypothetical scenario, we have, say, 200 acres and we would meet 80% of our needs, like. That's
Well,
okay with you guys, right?
Well, we're starting with 5%,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
because yes, we have financial obligations yet, and from a bonds perspective, you know, we ran through that, our financials. And you know, why, if communities have a desire to do this, if we can handle it financially and Shannon can plan for it, then it, you know, it works well for both. I don't know that you'll ever see power suppliers that you can do 30, 40, 50%, because, you know, again, you're adding resources that are variable. So you still have to maintain this infrastructure with the system. But if communities want more, the other portion on the mean contracted would be like you're taking, you know, goes into the main resource pool. So you're in essence, that while that energy is sinking to this load, that portion of the energy from, say, the mean contracted, that's just like receiving your regular electricity supply.
I think that's,
And anything that we would do solar wise, we would avoid an interconnect with Excel because they're expensive and take a very long time to do. We would actually put our own lines up, three-phase lines up, and actually just backfeed into a substation so we can spin the meter in the other direction. Kind of thing. So, yeah. I throw random good ideas and bad ideas at them all the time. Bounce them off of them and see, hey, is this even a thought process? Is putting a battery in everybody's home being slightly economical, which is not? Or is it better to buy big batteries and put it in a substation so that we can take the peak and bring it down, which helps me now because we pay FCRC costs off the peak, but is that reliable enough to reduce the FCRC? So it's fun conversations that we have a lot. To try to figure out where we should go fitting into the footprints of need. Because we're a member right now, and hopefully we will be in the future, because they're progressing in the right direction, and they're super helpful. They answer all my questions.
Thank you.
But those are exactly the great ideas, you know, that can move us forward. You know, Matt's saying, hey, well, what if we did storage? That's great for us, you know, that we would love that, and the willingness to be partners on it, to say, it only really helps me if we have a little bit of control over it, and it's helping the mean load. And, you know, you guys being amenable to that, and us being able to move forward together on something like it, it's great. I mean, it's why you're in a joint action agency, right, is to get these kind of benefits, so.
But they have to assume they're purchasing power for us at our peak load, so it's, if we can reduce our usage, reduce our peaks, and their need to purchase power or have a capacity for that power reduces also, which is good for the company because now you're not chasing these really expensive potentially alternatives in the future. So it's a balance between the two. It's just like, how much water do we want to sell? You know, we want to be efficient with it, but we need to sell enough of it to continue with the company to provide it. It's interesting though. We're over time.
you know, if it's okay, that's the last item on the agenda. I really don't anticipate that taking much, but we have a half hour set aside. I don't think it's gonna take more than 10 minutes, so. Is everybody okay if we go 15 minutes over on this conversation for both flew in from?
I'd like to, I think I have a discussion of climate action plans. I don't want to shortchange that too much. So,
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
All right, well, renewable pools, we achieved both Nebraska and Glenwood Springs, the 100% renewable was through our wind. Right, and we also have energy from the landfill gas. Everything, you know, when it comes to modernization, this is one of the areas that's been around a long time. What we're starting to see with wind, and I'll talk about that later, with, you know, the challenges coming with the resource transitions, is there gets to be so much of it, it can overproduce the load, so it gets curtailed. So what this renewable pool, the modernization of that is going to bring more resources into it. More of the hydro that we have, the small hydro will come into it. Our next era solar, any DG, the being contracted, if we would put solar in a community, those risks would come into this program. That energy basically comes into this program. So the Central Nebraska Hydro comes into this program, so it creates a bigger pool to work from. So we don't have to worry about And keep in mind, our program is based on, you will receive a rec that verifies what you're getting, and those recs come from mean resources or mean contracted resources. We're not out buying recs on the market. That's happened twice, and we have provisions for that in the agreement if we come short. And like when Kimball Wind, when we took the old wind farm down and put in the new one, there was a year there where we had to go out and purchase and cover while that was being built. So again, this is green rate, and this in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we will be taking this to work for free.
There's more and more demand for renewable resources, and we do cost a little bit more than just the AM rate, which is the power, the base power rate that we charges. So Gunnison, for example, would like to be 100% renewable also. So I think it makes more sense for me to bulk everything together instead of just being wind and everything else is in the other. They're just bulking everything together as a renewable resource and saying this is the E rate. You will pay this much for it, and you will pay a little bit more. It is what it is, something. To have that luxury, if you want to call it, to say that you're 100% renewable. So it makes perfect sense, especially if we bring more and more things on. But eventually, the E rate will probably be the M rate, because as we move toward 2050 and we're hitting that carbon neutral, basically everything within the portfolio, most everything within the portfolio will be some form of rate. So they're going to have to converge at some point in the future.
So Matt already covered this slide with battery storage just a few minutes ago, but that is one of the things we'll be picking up early next year. Once we get through our budget season, is how do we deal with battery storage and start to get policy wrapped around that, because you know what Matt brought to the table is what if the community somehow supports getting this in homes, and the community, your community can benefit. Well, we got to sit down with our members to say, how can this benefit the community? How can it, you know, if the community makes that type of investment, how can it's, you know, they get the most benefit out of that investment? Yet me as a whole also benefits from that power supply, and that may be a demand response. You know, we pay for demand response. We pay energy efficiency. You know, we budget money for communities to have those things. So, you know, that maybe this is another element of that. Again, it's kind of creating that win-win for, you know, with the FCRs, because you know, that reduction could be allowed, and under that it's considered demand response, things like that. So we look forward to that dialogue. It makes a lot of sense to do those things, and I think it's really getting the communities together and coming up with the best solution for me as a whole. And then lastly here, our agreements are life of the bonds, which we have bonds going out to 2041, but then also your obligations committed to on the facility when you sign up. And some of those facilities, which are under, you know, never put this distinct end date or learning registration of 15 grandchildren away from the attorneys that drafted the contract or something like that. It's, you know, and that was a contract entered into back in the 80s. So we need to take a good, honest look at that. You know, you need a long-term commitment to get the best price and also stability. And I'll show that again a little bit in the energy pricing here. You know, long-term agreements help price stability. So you need that. So it's not that, you know, we do have shorter-term products, but both of our systems are in long-term agreements, but they also want to feel that they're fine. And so what we're working on, and we'll take the concept to the board later this month, is something that gives it more finite periods of time. So it's not into perpetuity, maybe at 25 years, so that when we go to these communities, and hopefully they see what we've done from the modernization, hopefully they're still, you know, we feel we're very price competitive, and we continue to land new communities as we pursue them, because we are still price competitive. And anyway, after 41 years, it's time to overhaul that and really get better things, and hopefully that, you know, contributes how you feel going into 2029 and what your next steps are in that regard. So Organized markets. Now, I'm gonna do here is a very, very quick education lesson on how a market works. So bear with me. I'll actually do just a little bit of math, but I will make it quick and painless. And I'll use rounded numbers, so we don't have to do any decimal. But as far as organized markets, a lot of these slides that you're gonna see, I'll be talking about Southwest Power Pool. Now, there's two reasons I'm talking about Southwest Power Pool is as RTOs are developing, they're the current one that's working on developing our RTO in our footprint. There's a lot of other things going on. But they're the current one. The other thing is they've done great things with renewable energy. I think I've talked about that before, and I'll show a little bit more of what they're doing. So they demonstrate the benefits a market can bring to a footprint. And then they have these great pictures I can put in here, slides that really can tell a story better than I can explain it. Right here, so the regional markets, the picture down at the bottom left shows the structure, what we'll call regional transmission organizations, or I'll call RTOs, or I'll interchange it with the word market. You can see everywhere in the country, pretty much you have these structured markets, with exception to WEC, the WECC, that darker blue to the left. Everyone else pretty much has those, but there's a big area of the country that's still what we would call bilateral. I mean, that's where we're scheduling resources to the loads. The market concept says, I'm going to tell the market how much load I need to serve in my communities on a day-ahead basis, and the market's going to bring the energy. I'm also going to tell them how my units can perform tomorrow, and my units go to the market for them to determine when and how to run them based on economics, reliability, and all those factors. So it divorces your resources from your load in that regard in the market. That seems a little strange, but I'll show you that where we feel strongly about it. Now, in our footprint, because of our members in Iowa, we're in the MISO footprint, and the SPP, the lighter blue footprint. To the right, we are emerging and have emerged in 2020, started 2021. The light blue up in the upper right is the Western Energy Imbalance Service market. So that's the current market that's now PSCO's joining. As of 2023, PSCO's joining that energy imbalance. That is like a baby step into a full regional market. It just covers a little bit. You're buying a little bit of your energy at the top end from the market based on economics, but you have to still bring all your resources in and run them. It doesn't start and stop them like a full-blown market. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to equate this to think of a carpool. There's 4 folks that are going to drive between Aspen and Glenwood Springs in the carpool. Each one has a car. What you agree to share is the cost of the fuel for the car. So every day when you drive somebody's car, everybody pays 25% of that fuel cost to drive their car. What you don't share is your license, your registration, your car payment of your car. And that's the way markets function. We all share in and take advantage of the fuel costs, but each plant owner is responsible for those fixed costs, the cost of the facility.
Who pays for the road?
We do.
The load side pays for that transmission, and to some extent, developers like generation developers, to some extent, although it's small. That is a very good question. So that's the concept. Now, why do you get a better price out of that? Well, say I run around the clockwise here, utility A, each one has a 100 megawatt plant. Utility A's is $15, you got $20 for B, and on up to $30 at utility D. So and say each one serves about 100 megawatts of load. Well, on a nice spring day, people are barbecuing, they're hanging clothes on the line, not much energy. There's only 150 megawatts of load to serve. Now, everybody has to say, if my unit's able to run, you have to offer it in. Okay, but they're only gonna pick plant A and plant B because the 100 megawatts of plant A is enough to serve the load, and then you need 50 megawatts of plant B to finish serving the 150 megawatts of load. Now, what that does is, yes, plant A only costs $15, but you have what they call locational marginal pricing. The pricing structure is the price that you pay to serve your load is the marginal unit, the last unit dispatch. So you're not paying the $15, you're actually paying the $20. That's what your load pays, and that's what your generators are reimbursed. Now, that's a very general concept because things like transmission congestion and things like that actually impact the LMP price, but that's a good example of really what we do. And then you have example 2 is now you have high summer heat day, you have 325 megawatts. Well, all 4 plants are going to be running, and the price that dictates what the market pays is plant D. So, so that's in general. I'm gonna-
When the payment goes out to allocate it to all 4 different plans, the plan that sells it at 15, does it still benefit from getting paid at 30 for that?
The $15 plan, yeah, it gets paid $30. So granted, their load is also paying, so as a utility, it's kind of a break even. But if you have a little bit of excess, say you have more energy in your plants than what your load is served, then on those extra megawatts, you've just made additional revenue to help cover your plant costs. So, I love it when I get questions on this. All right. I'm gonna hand it over to Bruce here to cover your question about transmission and kind of how it's done. And this will play into the challenges that lie ahead with renewables and development.
Yeah, so again, part of the idea of what the SPP West are moving into this market. So currently with it being kind of bilateral, but as these Gesco considers moving into the market, then one of the things you do is you turn your facility, your transmission owner, you turn your facilities over to the RTO, so they run the facilities. And by doing that, again, kind of like what Brad mentioned earlier, there's a lot of efficiencies that are created, benefits that are that you find from that. And one of them is, again, the renewable aspect of it. So you are truly benefiting from the RTO running their transmission facilities. And so as part of that, then there's additional planning that goes along with this that typically you wouldn't, that the RTO is they're fairly, I would say, sorry about that. That they spend a lot of time making sure that there's a lot of planning that's done throughout the RTO side, and so they're looking at all the new and existing loads. So is and all the especially with the generation side, as new solar facilities come online or wind comes online, they're constantly monitoring and studying this. And so, and again, system constraints. So the current system constraints, they're looking at making sure that they're reliable and cost effective. So that's a lot of what they're doing with the transmission piece. And again, there's considerations for all these different things. They're regulated by FERC, so they have to follow a lot of those sort of things. But again, it's a very slower process. So typically they do there's an ITP process, so integrated transmission planning, and with that there's like on a yearly basis they look at near-term, long-term assessments. And so it's usually a 10-year or 20-year assessment, And so that they're always looking at that, and that's what some of the things that SPP does. And so that's kind of how that works. But again, it's kind of a little bit of a slower process, but it, I don't know. Brad, if you wanted to add to that.
No, and that's fairly universal to, MISO has a similar process, you know, all of them do that if they take on those systems. It's really, if you could build enough wire in the system so that you never have congestion and megawatts can flow from any facilities, it lowers the overall cost of the system. You can get the lowest cost resources anywhere in the footprint, but that costs a lot of money to build that transmission. In exchange, so you have to balance, right? You know, I'll pay less for energy, but I'll pay more for transmission. And what's that like?
So the color of our pathway project, and if you aren't all aware, would be fairly soon. I've been working with Matt on this for a little while, but back in, I guess, March of 2021, Excel or Gasco had requested a certificate of public convenience and necessity before PUC. And so actually in June of 2022, that was granted to them. And as you can see, I guess the top part of that is where you can see it's a very costly project. We're talking between 1.7 and initially it was 1.7. Now the latest numbers I see, it's jumped up to $2 billion project, and that is just. And so it's a huge project. You're looking at about 5 different segments, but it's all kind of on the front range. And it's being built it should be in operation as with their projecting anyways between 2025 and 2027. Some of the issues that we've found with this particular project is that one, it's being built entirely on the front range. So Glenwood Springs is not physically connected to this project, and it does not have any contracted generation resources. So with any of the proposed projects, so they're building a lot of it by Excel or Fiasco in order to basically serve the Denver load. The other thing is that when this was being funded, it's being funded primarily all by itself. So or Fiasco. I use that interchangeably. But so initially when they were discussing it, they were talking about it where other potential local transmission providers could be included. So they were talking with Black Hills, Tri-State, a lot of those folks. Well, they have since they dropped out, and Fiasco has taken ownership of the entire project. So then the other part of this then is that the cost of the project now is based on retail and wholesale customers. So the big thing, and this is where you should be, the bullet that you should take look at here is that by fiscal year 2028, that your transmission rate will more than double if this project takes place. So just to put this in perspective, the mean bill that you receive every month, the big one that you were talking about earlier, is transmission comes to about 10% of your bill, and by 2028, you would be looking at about 20%, a little bit more. So that's very important. So what we've been doing is we've been working with Glenwood Springs. Matt's a great resource, and he's fantastic. So you guys are very fortunate to have him here. Matt and Aspen in Central Colorado. We've been working with these communities, and we've sent public comment to the PUC, and we've also sent letters to Excel. But recently, we've sent another letter to the new president of Excel, Robert Kennedy, or just to say, hey, we're still here. We're still trying to figure out how this is going to impact us. How can you please help us or explain what we can do? And so that's something to be aware of. We don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
So this transmission is what I hear you saying is that the new transmission capacity doesn't benefit the western slope or at all, but we're will be paying for it.
Well, that's kind of what we
Does
say.
it fit
And-
in the whole system?
Yeah, and we've never been like opposed to them building it. I mean, that has never been the issue. It's really who's responsible for the cost.
Okay, right.
So it's in the past, and one of the things I forgot to mention is, in the past, they've also, they've changed their model of how they have attributed the cost. So instead of them assigning typically generator or owners of developers or generator owners, they would be helping pay for those costs. But Excel has kind of said, well, we'll take it on, because one of the things with transmission is there's a good return on investment. So they know that this is an investment opportunity for them to spend money, and then so that's kind of what that.
And the main part is then kind of proving out to show, they haven't really shown this will benefit our Western slope communities.
Right.
And that's part of the process is you have to, if you're gonna charge people, you have to show benefit.
Okay.
And that's.
I know, we're 7 minutes over.
We are, I just want to ask a question for you and maybe Carl jointly is, are we working with other like Delta or other Western Slope power providers to make our voice heard on this?
Is there more we can do?
Right.
We're working with me, the Aspen and Center, which is the kind of four of us that are being mostly affected by this thing. And to kind of bring it out to a close is they did have a project planning meeting. They still had a project planning meeting, a month ago or so, and they basically verified that there are anticipated costs are going to go up like 217% by 2028. So and relatively, we've talked about all this before. We pay about $1 million right now. We would go to $2 million, which would have a significant cost impact
Right.
for our end users because you just added 10% to the bill. We
Do
don't,
we need to be in a legal battle on this, or, I mean, is there more, that's a question, Carl?
we're in process with
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And I guess the other, I'm sorry, the other part about it is there's sort of this, the first slide we were talking about the RTO, there's sort of this race to get this transmission built and to own it before they put it into the market. So that they're the owners of it, so when they put it into whether it's SPP or wherever, that they're the owners of that transmission and then get the benefit. And so that's kind of how that works.
We're in an RTO, they would be planning this with everybody. Right. RTO would be planning the capacities on all the lines. We just use different lines to get capacity where we need to instead of building this. So that it really needs to be built, and then we share the costs across the grid instead of just with one entity. We just have to be a transmission customer of that entity, so they get the pay for it.
That's right. And they, in essence, they also look at this as a local planning project versus a regional project. Typically, you would, as vast, as wide as this project is, it should have typically been considered a regional project where other folks should have been involved in it, but they somehow were able to Fiasco was able to say, hey, this is a local planning project, and they were able to basically take it on all themselves. So there's a lot of question marks along the way.
So we have another, no, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's not a sorry. I hate to cut you short. We could probably talk for another half hour, but is there any final questions that anybody has? Guys, thank you so much. We appreciate the partnership. We appreciate the 100% renewable that we get to brag and wave our flag about. And thank you for working with us.
Can we get a copy of that? Yes, I mean, you can read through all that stuff.
Well, it would be great to have that in the future. It'd be great to have it ahead of time because
I'm trying to catch up as you're talking and figuring it out, so just.
Sorry.
Thank you all.
Safe travels.
Thanks for being Huh? Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
What's going on, big boss?